Great. Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome to the semesterly revision workshop for computer foundations of computing. This workshop is held by CISSA, which you may or may not know. We're the largest tech club in University of Melbourne, and we represent all the computer science, data science students in undergraduate and postgraduate. We've been around for a long time, and we run all sorts of workshops and industry events. We work with a lot of big companies like Google, Microsoft, Canva, and also consulting firms and trading companies like Optava, IMC, and yeah, they sponsor us, and they do a lot of tech talks, and they also have a lot of recruitment events with us. So this is a great way to sort of get exposure to what industry is like and prepare yourself for a great career. We also, of course, do a lot of social events. We've run pub nights and the Amazing Race this semester, and we're looking to do much more in semester 2. Yeah, so please join our club. It's free, and you can find us on Facebook. We also have a large group called the CISSA discussion space, which is a great place to for UniMelb CS students to just talk about things and banter, ask questions about subjects. Yeah, and I think we'll have a QR code at the end. We also do have a Discord. You can join and sort of have discussion there as well. Yeah, and these are some example of events that we have. We're gonna hold more hackathons in semester 2, and we're gonna have more sort of educational workshops. So the revision workshop is something that we do every semester. We also run different workshops covering content like web development, data science, things like that. Yeah. All right. So this is yeah. Please sign up on this QR code. I believe Annie's gonna post our, hopefully has posted our Facebook page. Yeah. Okay. All right, so I think that's enough from me. I'll hand it over to Kaif.
Yep, cool. So welcome to CISSA Presents Foundation of Computing. So we have arranged this division lecture and exam prep. Mostly it's going to be by people who have done the subject before, and it will be around how to prepare the best for the exams. And let me come back here. Cool. So let's first have a look what's going to happen today. The first half, we're going to go through some exam and preparation tips. This would cover things like what are the common type of questions you get, how to prepare for the exam, some tips and advices, as well as some in-exam tips and advice. Then we'll have a quick question answer based on the first half of the lecture. And the second part, we will break everyone into breakout rooms, and we will go through a past problem. And the reason we're doing in the breakout rooms, so you can ask any individual questions and any other burning questions you have. And if you have any particular question, confusions, and I think we have 5 or 6 different people who run the breakout room, so we can put. Cool. what's up next? So that kicks off the first half, which is the exam and preparation advice with me. So who am I? Just I thought I should do a very quick intro. For those who don't know me yet, my name is Kaif. I am a third-year student doing my undergrad at for majoring in computer science, and I'm quite passionate about technology and cybersecurity in general. So if you ever see me on campus or we're going to talk about those things, please come and say hi. Moving on. The first half of the structure I've already told it once, but I'm just going to go dive it a bit deeper. So what we'll do in this first half, 30 to 40 minutes, is look at some common type of questions that come in previous years. Unlike some other subjects and similar to other subjects, computer system, foundations of computing has this tendency of almost reducing the type of question it gives you. So if you look at questions dating back to 2019, 18, 2015, or even further, you'll see it's almost the same type of questions, but the exact question is just changed. And that is a huge advantage, because if you know what sort of questions to expect, you are much better equipped in tackling them. The second part will be, I'll share some various tips and resources which I have used when I prepared and did my exam. And the last part is in-exam tips and strategies that I personally used, and it served me quite well, and I still sometimes do lots of them. Cool. Just a quick disclaimer: the next however long minutes is not an exhaustive guide. This lecture is meant to complement your existing preparation. So certain type of questions might or might not show up based on the year, but what we're doing here is trying to predict what type of questions and what type of preparation we should take based on what came in past years. So you know how when you buy insurance or stocks or anything, it says past performance do not indicate future something. I just insert that line here. So same thing. And apart from the strategies I mentioned, please do figure out your own strategies and experiment with different things. Those are the things that will inherently help you learn and grow. Cool. Common types of questions. At this point, I have two requests from you all. The first one is, when I present, I do not see any chats and all because of the screen setup. So if you have any questions or anything you want to ask, feel free to unmute yourself if you really have something that, if you see something really wrong, or if you really want to know something. And the second one is, if you have any pets lying around, feel free to open up your camera and please show. I'm always keen to look at other people's pets. Okay, the first part and the major part, common type of questions and how to approach them. In this section, we'll see I'll try to break down or categorize the types of questions that I have seen in my exam, the sample exams they give us, as well as exam papers in past years. I think I've analyzed up to 2014, and I saw a whole plethora of patterns. And what I'm going to try to do is present all those patterns to you so you have a clear understanding. Cool beans. I can see some questions. Ooh, the chat box has popped up. I'll cover them very soon because Samuel. I have a dedicated Q&A section as well. I'll cover all of them together if that's okay. So cool. Next up is let's have a look at our first type of question. The most common and basic one I think you'll get is the Python one-liners. So what are these? These would be, they will ask you to either generate these or ask you what's the output of these kind of questions. I've got a sample example here. This one is from my exam in my question back in 2019, Sem 1. And essentially what it's going to do is give you a bunch of these, 4 or 5 or even more, And for each, they'll ask you, hey, what's the output, or the vice versa. They'll ask you that, hey, based on this input, we want this output. Can you generate a one-liner that would result in this output? So these are the most basic ones, and usually these ones are the ones that pop up at the beginning of the question. The type of things they usually cover can be string and list manipulation, dictionaries, dictionary-based searches, list comprehensions. If you're not familiar with list comprehensions, I highly recommend getting familiar with them. And they're just there to test your basic knowledge and understanding of Python as a language. And I have got one example. Can someone say in the chat that what will be the answer for this? So this is supposed to give you a Boolean answer, true or false. Based on this, can someone tell what might be the answer? True. I see a plethora of twos. That's good. Cool. Moving on forward. Now, how to tackle these? Some tips I would give is you're very likely to see string-based problems that they'll give you a string and they'll ask you to either slice it or split it or different kinds of things. So no common string manipulation strategies in Python. If you just Google common string manipulation methods, you'll find plenty of them. And it's a good handy one to learn because it's not just for the one-liners, for the questions that are gonna come afterwards. They're gonna they're gonna help you as well. Again, I see questions in the chat. I'll answer them later when in the Q&A section, just to not to disrupt the flow. The next one is practice common list and dictionary methods and index-based operations. So I will say I've got a second one. This might be a bit more difficult compared to the first one, but these are the standards you should be expecting to get. Can someone very quickly say what will be the result for this? So it's just sorting a dictionary and then based on the values, and then getting the indexes, the first one. The first one is Thorin. Yep, I can see plenty of Thorins, that's correct. And I could also see answer for the second one from someone, Arya, great job, you've done both of them. So yeah, the second one, Arya got that right. And yeah, if you're not asking any questions, please mute yourself. Cool. So these are the common types of questions you're pretty likely to get. These are, again, these are not made up questions. I've sourced them pretty much from past years. So have a prepare for them and be prepared to produce these kind of questions as well. List comprehensions, they were a very popular thing back in our times. Like it was pretty much a guarantee to see a list comprehension question. So if you're not sure about list comprehensions, it might seem very, I don't know, scary. The first time I saw list comprehensions, my initial response was to scream and run. But once you try to understand what's going on, it's actually not too bad. And so know some of the basic list comprehensions using for loops, using conditions, and etc. And that's gonna help you a lot in the exam itself. Cool beans. Okay, the next type of question you are gonna get is reordering jumbled code. So for these kind of questions, you'll see that they'll give you a description and they'll give you an input and output most of the times. And they'll ask you to, hey, based on this description and input output, can you reorder the code? Which means the code is already going to be with you, and in the left-hand side, I've got the example from my question, and what it basically asks you to pretty much put the lines back and make it like a valid code. And something to notice is that most of the times, what I see with this reordering, that they either contain, they're usually a function, and inside the functions there are either some for loops, and then there's some conditions. So it's pretty straightforward if you ask me these kind of questions. And the way I would approach is first look at the input and the output. That gives away the most of the things, as well as the description. Once you see, the way I approach these questions is I see the input and I see the output, and in my head, I try to plan the steps. Okay, how do I convert this input to this output? What will be the steps? What will be the first thing I need to do? I would have an estimate or a guess, and I'll try to look in the code here that, hey, is there anything, a line of code that matches my input or output? And once you get that flow, the lines come more quickly, but that initial sort of thought and breaking it down into steps is very important. Sometimes the description itself gives away a lot of different hints and codes. The description itself can help you identify the major steps you need to take. So when I see the question, what I try to think is, okay, this is the input, this is the output, how would I do this? And these are the steps. Even back in the days when it was pen and paper, I would actually write down like some bullet points that I need to do this first, do that first, and then basically take my code from point A to point B. That's something you can certainly do. You don't need to write down. You can always do it in your head, but if you think writing the steps down can help you, then definitely do that. It did help for me, because then I could go back and validate my step that, okay, after this, it's supposed to do the XYZ. Is there a code that does XYZ? If I have it, then I come and then I put that back. And while I'm making that code, I also keep track of the current state. What I mean by that is, let's say I've typed down 3 lines of code, right? I've reordered 3 lines of code. I try to pretty much either write down the current state or in my head, keep track of it. For example, if I passed in a string, what does this 3 line of code do to my string? Does it slice it? Does it convert into, I don't know, based on the string, convert, like generate a number? Does it take part of the string based on index? What's the current state of the string? So the current state and where you need to sort of take it as an output determines a lot of the next few lines of code or can help you greatly. So yeah, TLDR, look at the input and output clearly. Try to identify and establish some certain steps, and while you're putting the code back into those steps, also keep track of how your input is getting changed, so you know, or you have a sort of intuition what to do next. Again, these kind of ones are generally easier spectrum. At least I find them easier compared to some other questions, because you already have the code and the description is quite good. In our times, what we basically needed to do is write 1, 2, 3 down in a like box. But I think if you're doing in Grok now, if things are online, so you'll just be putting in Grok and hitting the run. That means more advantage for you, because you can basically see whether your tests are passing or not. Something to keep in mind that if it's Grok based, then it might or might not have partial marks. During our time, these questions would have partial marks, which means if I have put the first half of the code in correct order, I would get marks for that. For your ones, you can just ask the examiners during the exam or afterwards, or even before, if you think that this kind of questions are going to come. Cool. That was that. And the next type or category of questions that you will see very frequently is producing a specific input or a test case. So what does that mean? They'll give you a description and a detailed list of sample sort of output, or in this case, inputs even. And then they'll ask you to produce specific outputs. Okay, let me rephrase that. They'll ask you to produce certain inputs that make certain outputs. For example, if they have given you a function that, I don't know, multiplies 2 numbers. That's very basic, but take it as an example. That multiplies 2 numbers. then they might ask you that, hey, can you give me an example and input that will create the output 10? And then your job is to pretty much create that input. So here's an example from my exam paper. It might seem a bit too confusing just seeing the ask itself, but what it's basically asking you to do is that one, it was a CSV file, and they pretty much gave us the code to break the CSV file into different rows and then correct the, based on the rows, they wanted to identify whether it'll rain or not, something like that. So basically they wanted us to say that, okay, what kind of rows do you think can we input, which will give us a certain output, which will give us that it will rain today or it will not rain today. So basically your job is to understand the code and then come up with inputs. How would you approach this kind of questions? Whoops, I see some transitions, which I did not expect it to be there anyways. So the reason I actually put these questions these type of questions side to side, and no, I'm not reusing the slides. They're actually very similar. How would you go about these questions? The first thing you definitely need to do is read through the code and understand what is exactly going on. So if a sample output is giving, track the input throughout the code and see what are the different things they're doing. Because the thing that these questions usually test is the inputs they're actually asking you to produce. They're usually edge cases, and they do not often occur in the main sort of application of that program. So it's very crucial you sort of take your time and understand the code line by line and see how the input is getting changed throughout. Okay, this is a relevant question, so I'll answer what is edge cases. So when, for any program, we have two kinds of cases, an edge case and a normal case. So normal cases are usually the, you can think of the most common sort of uses of that program. If the program is supposed to, I don't know, I'm trying to come up with an example. Maybe a program is supposed to give, like the program I told you, to give you two multiplications of two numbers. And so in usual cases, you'll get two numbers, multiply them and give it back. But an edge case might be when the program is zero, no matter what the result is, you do not actually need to do the multiplication because you know that the answer will always be zero. You don't need to go to the rest of the code. You can directly say it's zero. So edge cases are these special cases that that are different from your normal cases, the most common cases, and they're there to pretty much test whether you understand the program properly or not. That in certain cases, our program might not behave the way it behaves. So it is also, they might also try to test you to determine those edge cases where the program will not behave where we expect it to behave. And I remember in one of the past test cases, what it, this kind of problem, what it essentially did is it gave you the code and gave you the common description that, okay, this is a code to do this. But the questions were, can you actually think of 3 cases or 3 inputs where it will not do this and do the exact opposite thing it's the program is designed to do? So in those scenarios, it's essentially the same thing. Even though the question is worded differently, it's exactly the same thing. It's asking you to come up with inputs that will produce a specific output. So let me see what bullet points I've jotted down. Yeah, the same thing. For these kind of questions, before you jump onto the figuring out the inputs, actually understand the code line by line. See what are the changes that happen to the code throughout the code, and then try to predict that, okay, in this particular if else statement, this particular input might be produced. And I wish I could give you some more examples, but in this lecture, but don't worry, during the practice test, we're going to be doing breakout rooms. You'll kind of see this kind of questions because I think even in your sample test, they've given you in Grok, you'll see some of this common categories pop up. Cool. Moving on forward. The next type of questions, very, very common, filling the blanks. Again, same thing, they'll give you a bunch of code and they'll, a block of code, my bad, sorry. And they'll give you certain numbers and which numbers are pretty much blank, and your job is to fill in the blanks. So there's nothing too complicated going there. But something I noticed that this fill in the blank questions are always some function. They give you a function and say that, okay, this function is supposed to produce XYZ, and your job is to complete that function. So I think having it a function makes life easier. One thing it was very notorious for during our times is partial marks, that if you I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory. If you can fill in the first two blanks and not the three, you'll get a 2 out of 5 or something like that. The way to approach these ones is very much similar, but there's a big sort of trend I've seen is this fill in the blank questions. They are usually broken down into chunks. So the first two, 1 and 2 you see is supposed to do a specific action or step. And then 3 and 4 is part of a specific action and step. And the 5 is another step. So if you can break down what the function is trying to do in several steps and understand that the code is gonna be in steps, that's gonna be a huge boost for you, because then you pretty much can guess that, okay, instead of trying to figure out these blank lines in the context of the whole question, you're trying to figure out these blank lines on the context of a very small part of the code, a small step, which is easier to construct. So long story short, what I'm trying to say is these questions and these blanks are often grouped together into specific steps. And instead of, obviously you need to have the bigger picture in mind, but also try to have this smaller steps in mind, that and know that these blank lines are often grouped together. And if you can figure out one, it's easier to figure out let's say number 2. Cool beans. Moving on to here, is there anything? Look out for specific clues. What I mean by that is sometimes the edge cases I mentioned or specific sort of inputs, the description often mentions it that, okay, when the input is 0, it's meant to behave this way. And the reason these are important is sometimes these blank lines are if statements, conditions. So those statements are there to pretty much catch those certain conditions or certain things the question has mentioned. So keep that in mind, that any detail the question mentions, they're not just there for the sake of being there. They're there to help you fulfill in these blanks. So read the question properly and try to find those clues, and that can greatly help you. One thing, I'm not sure how the question is going to go in Grok, because unfortunately I haven't done it in Grok, but I used to do is once I have filled in the blanks, I'll take separate example, which is not probably in the input or output or in the sorry, sometimes I give pauses because I see questions in the chat box and I get distracted. I have a bad habit. Anyways, I'll come back to those questions later. So the questions that are very, very relevant, I answer them now, like edge cases, and if they can be answered afterwards, I will answer them afterwards. Okay, coming back, I like to test them with a different sort of test case or example, because that validates the fill in the blanks that have filled in. Sometimes if I use the example given to us, I might work on some certain presumptions, and that presumptions might hinder me from doing the code properly. I'm not sure how that's going to work now, because in Grok, when you press sort of test, it might test, or because this is an exam, they wouldn't probably, you can't test, or there wouldn't be any test cases. Anyways, what I'm trying to say, yeah, there's no testing capability. Cool. So you need to do a bit of testing of all the codes I've mentioned, and few things. The first one, don't obviously use the one they have given in the input, but also try to come up with your own example and own example output if you have time, and test your code using that, because the example given to us in the question can sometimes, like I mentioned, can be too simplified, or they often don't test every aspect of the code. So if you have time, come up with one small, like your personal test case and test your code. And I specifically mean that for the fill in the blank ones. Cool. Let's see how we're going with time. Looks solid. Cool. The next type of questions is various forms of errors. Pretty straightforward. They're gonna give you a code block, or they're gonna give you a description, and they're gonna say that, hey, can you identify where exactly this specific type of errors are going to happen in this code block, or they'll ask you to produce those errors. I mean, you need to write a specific line or give a specific input that's going to produce those errors. For example, this was the question in my year. They basically gave us a code block, and I gave a bunch of errors, and they said like, hey, when exactly index error is going to happen, when exactly attribute error is going to happen, type error, value error. Thank God for you, you can pretty much Google them. During our times when it was in the exam hall, if you didn't know what type error is or attribute error is, the only option is to cry. Now you can pretty much Google them and understand what they are. So this code, this question pretty much gave us a code block and gave us these errors, and they asked us, can you produce them? I think for your sample error, a sample question, I saw something like they gave you a code block and they said that write a code that will produce specific kind of errors, or can you identify 4 different lines that has errors in them? So this question is a bit broad. It can either ask you to produce the errors by writing code, or this might ask you that, hey, where exactly in the code there are errors, and you need to identify them. And just know your common type of errors. You should see a lot of them during your project, so try to understand. And the other ones, such as like syntax error, or what is a syntax error, what is a logic error, and what is etc. Just knowing these, it's a pretty black and white thing. You either know them or you either don't know them. And the way I prepared for these, I pretty much Googled like common Python type of errors and reason. And I think the first few Google results were like quite good. And I just did like 20-30 minutes of quick reading, and that was sufficient. Next type of question is, this is again a very popular one. I didn't see this in this year's sample test or last year's sample test. My memory is a bit finicky, but in every other written exams, 2019 and beyond, this is like a must-have question. Like I saw these in almost all of them. Again, disclaimer: this might or might not be in your case, but there's a very high probability that you'll see a question which will ask you to replace the loops. And what does that exactly mean? This will, very simple, give you a code block that will contain a loop, and it will either contain a while loop or a for loop. And it will say, can you write the same code, the same functionality, but with the other kind of loop? So if it's a while loop, you'll need to write a for loop. If it's a for loop, you'll need to write the same code with a while loop. Pretty straightforward. And so for these kind of questions, know how to increment a counter. For example, in this while loop, the increment or decrement, I should have shouldn't say increment. It can be increment and decrement. So this is your counter here. For loops, it will be in the for loop statement. Know how loop termination works. So again, in the for loop, it's often a range. If it's in while loop, it's a condition. And basically what you need to do is, in the given code block, you have to identify which one is the increment and which one is the termination, and then you're pretty much solid. Then you can write it. The last part I'll say, and that this is actually bit me back in the actual exam when I did it, is remember to practice reverse loops. As you can see, this while loop is actually not incrementing, it's decrementing. So in the for loop, you're supposed to go not from range, let's say 1 to n, like we usually do. It goes from n to 1. So it's supposed to go down. And it's not just if you write from range n to 1, it doesn't automatically go from n to 1 because it always increases. And I didn't know in my exam how to write a reverse for loop, and that bit me, rest in peace. So definitely know how to write reverse for loops in your exams if you don't know already. Cool. What else? That was that. So prepare reverse for loops. Gonna save your lives. And I guess the last but not least, the type of questions. I hope this is the last. I'm not missing anything. Or by missing, I mean nothing's gonna pop up in the next few slides. Is writing a function. So these are like pretty much straight up. It just tells you write a function to do X, Y, Z. That's it. Clean and simple. Some years I've seen it comes up with a very long text that this is what we're trying to do and write the function for it. And or just in certain years it just tell you, okay, write a function to do this, just one liner, and that's it. And it gives you a sample input and output, and it usually is the last question and typically the longest question. Again, this is a personal thing. For me, it felt the longest. The way I would approach them is aka understand what's being asked, aka read the question 3 times or 2 times to pretty much identify what exactly is being asked. And so from my personal experience, as well as talking to my friends, these type of questions are the ones that look the most overwhelming, that it's just, it has asked you to, because you're pretty much, until this part, you have given some parts of the code or the code in a jumbled form. So you had something to work with, and then suddenly they straight out say, no code, no nothing, just produce your own code from blank. And that results in some people sort of, I don't know, there's writer block. I don't know if there's something called coder's block, but they hit that coder's block and they're like, okay, what to do? So my tip would be is these questions are designed to some sort of give the impression that they're very big, very complex, but they actually can be broken down into smaller steps. And the way I approached it is I read the question a few times, understood what is they're asking us to do, and then write what I'll do in a few steps, break the entire problem into a few sub-problems, and then try to produce the code just for the sub-problem. So I would not worry myself with this entire big code I need to write. I would just say, okay, this is the sub-problem. How do I make input X to input Y, or that input that is giving to us X into Y? And I'll just worry about that for now. And then I'll worry about the next parts afterwards. And that works for me a lot now, even for exams, as well as when I'm working, I do pretty much approach problems in a similar way. And I think that's, from my perspective, that's the best advice I can give, that do incremental progress. You don't need to tackle the entire big problem at one go. Take the problem, try to break it down into small parts. For example, if it's a let's say they give you a problem to read from a CSV file and then count the number of rows, and in each row delete the last item and then write it back into a CSV. I'm not saying the CSV writing and reading is important. This is a dummy example. So how I would do it? I would not worry about the rest. I would just first worry about, okay, how do I read from a CSV? Let's write the code for that. And then once I've got that done, and I'll be like, okay, I have a CSV, and I have read the data from the CSV, and it's stored in, I don't know, in a list or in a dictionary. How do I convert a dictionary's last element into remove it or something like that? And you get the gist. So I'm trying to take it portion by portion, and honestly, it's just that and practice. Nothing else to say about this part. Cool. This is the promised question section I've said. So this is not the end of this lecture, but I'm just putting a small break in the middle so you can ask me questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask, and I'll address some of the questions in the chat. Let me see. So, past papers, recorded, blah, blah, blah. Is there recording later? Yes, I think so. Recording accessible to everyone. I hope so. Are we able to access the slides? Sure. I wasn't planning to make it, but I can. I'll just send the link to CISSA and CISSA will send it. Just FYI, I'm not, just I'll send it to CISSA and CISSA will share. Cool. What are edge cases? I've answered that. Is there any way we can test questions on the CSV files? Test questions on CSV files. What do you mean by that? Could you please elaborate? I'm a bit unsure what you mean by that. I'll move on to the other questions. Is there partial mark available for this section? From my experience, partial mark was available for all questions in our year. And even if you, when I read 2018, 2017's question, I saw that in the solution itself, it even specified that, okay, if they do this, partial mark for this. If they do that, the partial mark is that. Cool. So yeah, I'm not saying it's going to be for this year, but there's a very high probability. Then what's the portion of theory can be expected? So in our year, in the last question, there was just one theory question, which had like 4 or 5 subsections. They're very small. The ethics convention, those parts, and HTML. You should know them, but you should not spend like a lot of time in them. They should be quite straightforward. For the error generation part, are we meant to produce an incorrect program which provides a certain error? You can. It can be. It depends. For the error generation part, sometimes they tell you that, okay, this is like the example program. In what cases it would give you an index error? In what cases it would give you an attribute error? So that's certainly possible. Cool. Do you know the mark distribution? Is it easy to fail? Okay, this is my personal opinion. It is not very easy to fail in this subject because this subject, COMP101, COMP10001, is designed for people to get into coding, as well as a lot of you might be studying commerce, arts, design, and this is just this would be a breadth subject. So generally, this is a very easier and slower introduction to coding. So they don't test you very. The question itself is not very difficult. Generally, it's like a bell curve. Like there will be certain questions which are very easy to answer. I wouldn't say which questions are easy because that's very subjective, but they make the difficulty easy for certain questions. So to get to that pass mark, it's very easy. To get to the pass mark to H1, it's you need to know some stuff. To get H1 above, you obviously need to know the stuff well. And to get, I don't know, 90 plus or more, you need to know the things quite well. And this is, I think, believe it or not, this subject is a WAM booster if you're doing computing. I think most people I know have scored the most amount of marks in this subject because of mainly the exams. It's quite straightforward. Again, subjective can vary. Where would we see the recording? Ask CISSA, please. Maybe in their Facebook. For the theory question about computational counting ethics. Yeah, theory questions are common in past years. They might or might not be, but I don't know about this year because everything is in Grok and you can just look things up. So I don't see the point of those theory questions anymore. So that might be why they might reduce them. Do we allow to use Python tutor to test our code? Yeah, certainly. I don't see why not. Cool. Normal projects. Is that the is it normal that the projects are harder than final exams? My personal opinion was yes, the projects are like much bigger in quantity and they usually took more time and the exams were straightforward. So my opinion, do we need to know ethics and algorithm? Look, I cannot say yes and no that don't read it or do read it. My advice will be yes, read it. But I think I'm thinking that what's the point? Because most of the times, a lot of those algorithm stuff you can Google, but some of the ethics stuff can specifically from the lecture slide. And again, it's just one lecture. Hey, it wouldn't be too bad to just quickly put it in 2x speed and watch it. What's the harm? So my question would be, my answer to that would be, I cannot say anything definitive. If I were you, I would definitely cover that. How many practice exams we should do? As many as you can find, dude. Like, there's no questions there. So practice exams, as you can see, the questions are very, very similar. I actually have a very special segment for you all to share where can you find practice exams. That's coming up next. But yeah. Speaking of which, I should move on. The next, we're almost towards the end, so don't worry too much if you're bored. I hope you're not bored. Cool. The next part is preparations. How did I prepare? So the way I prepared is the first thing, practice the grok sheets. They were like very invaluable. The grok sheets pretty much helped me brush up the basics or any concepts I have missed. So things like functions, string, dictionaries, etc., is quite useful. So definitely you make sure that you are well on top of the I would say the theory. The second one is my favorite kind of way to prepare for any exam, not just COMP10001, is do past exam questions, because I personally benefit a lot from past exam questions, because the type of exams in UniMelb, if this is your first subject in computing, that's like a tidbit for you as well. Past exams are very, very similar, the exam types, to your exam. So it's very, very likely that and very, very beneficial if you can find past exams and then do them. The last part is Project Euler. So what is Project Euler? So basically what I did is when I was done with catching up with the lectures and theory, I wanted more practice, and I did some past papers, and I also solved this Project Euler questions. So Project Euler is basically, Hasne, can you put the Project Euler link in the chat, and also this link for past exams, the library.unimelb.edu. I'll come to it in a sec in the chat as well. It should be in the document I've sent you. Thank you. But moving back to Project Euler, so what it is, it's basically a bunch of questions from a various range, from easy to hard, that you need to do, that you can do. The reason I did Project Euler, because they're individual questions, and basically they're going to be very similar to the exam questions. The exam questions give you a function or a specific task and say that, hey, write a Python function to do this task. And I found Project Euler questions very, very similar, that they give you a very small task and they tell you that, hey, write code to do this. And you can do Project Euler in any language. And in this case, you'll be doing it in Python. That's very, very good practice. It personally helped me a lot. Again, this is not like must to do. This is just a recommendation, helped me a lot. If I had to recommend any one single thing, that would be do past papers. Like do past papers as much as you can. Cool. The link Hasne has given in the chat. So library.unimelb.edu.au/examination papers. So if you go there and search COMP10001, it's a uni website. You can actually find some of the old exam papers from 2017 and 2016. It's open to all. So definitely go there, download them. And I'm not sure if they have solutions, but anyways, you can download them and do them. Hopefully there are the solutions. I forgot to check. the cheat sheets, yes, the cheat sheets are quite worthwhile as well. They're a bit basic, I've found, but if you're not quite comfortable with the basic concepts, then do the cheat sheets. That will give you a lot of confidence with the basic concepts. But once you have done the cheat sheets, or if you know the basics quite well, then yeah, just do more exams and stuff as you can. This is like apart from CISSA, I know CISSA runs this subject in collaboration. I'm not sure if this is allowed from CISSA side or not. So like I personally have the exam papers and solutions I personally collected until I think 2015 or something. So if you want them, I unfortunately cannot share in this call because CISSA, if it is not shared with you by the subject, CISSA cannot share them, but I have like no moral boundaries or moral restrictions in sharing those. So if you want, find me on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, and just hit me up, and I'm more than happy to give you the questions. But yeah, otherwise you can find some here as well. How to find me? The name should be popping up here somewhere. The name, and it's in the lecture slides afterwards as well, so you can just go grab my name, and from there, if you have forgotten, which I suppose most people have. Cool. Just a small tidbit / joke from my year that we had to write down code into pen and paper, which was very, very stupid. And so I was preparing for the exams, and I saw one guy preparing for his exams, and he was writing code in Word and then saving the Word file, Python code as docs. And I just found that hilarious that someone would do that. It's good preparation though, but thank God you don't have to do it in pen and paper or anything like that. It's actually proper stuff. For those kind of things, I would highly recommend either, I'll type it in the chat maybe, either VS Code or Sublime, and turn off IntelliSense and use that. Cool. Is the 2020 exam papers available to us? I don't know. Cool. Tips during the exam. Again, I'm gonna wrap this up very quickly. During the exam, some things that I did was, for your one, don't explore the web way too much, because it's okay to look up syntaxes. I've got some spelling errors there. Apologies for that. It's okay to look up certain parts and certain syntax or methods, but if you're trying to find the entire solutions, the chances are you won't, and you actually spend a shit ton of time actually wasting. And these exam papers are actually designed for you to be able to do in those certain amount of time. So don't worry too much. If you see something and you have no clue how to do it, just try to break it down into smaller parts and just try. That's in most cases, that is much more productive than trying to find the answer. But in certain cases, like how to reverse like a string or things which are very obvious and you don't know, look them up. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Have notes and cheat sheets. It's much easier to know. The reason I say that is because you can always look things up, but if you have a cheat sheet, then you know that certain amount of things, like some basics and stuff, are in your cheat sheet, and you can very easily Control F. It's much quicker than just randomly browsing the web. I've given a cheat sheet in the links that Hasne has posted in the chat box. You don't need the entire thing. I think you just need the first few pages. You'll see when you see it. Like you'll understand when you see it. Like you only need parts of it. The ones relevant to you, keep that part. It's quite useful. That's the one I still use now, apart from Stack Overflow every now and then. Play by your strengths. What I mean by that is before the exam, you know the type of questions I've told you, and you know they're gonna come. They have a high probability of coming, and as well as the different things. So have a certain amount of certain type of strategy that, okay, I'm gonna do these questions first because I think I'm good at them, and then I'm gonna do the other questions last. So for example, I did the write the function question actually first, and did the other things afterwards in reverse order, because my logic was, okay, I'm most fresh my brain is the most fresh in the beginning of the exam, so I'm just going to do that, write a function and do the other things. You don't need to do that. You can just have whatever strategy you have, you feel comfortable with. But my point is, coming in the exam with some strategy is better than having no strategy at all and just seeing the question paper, and that sometimes can make you panic. And if you have a strategy, that helps you calm your nerves as well. Cool, that was all the tips I have for during the exam. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, which I know you do, I can see some in the chat, which I'll answer now. If you have any other questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask them directly, saves time. Otherwise, type them in the chat box. I'll look at the chat box now for the time being. Will there be recursions? Look, man, I'm not I'm not the teacher. How can I tell? Probably not. Yes, but there won't be any questions. That will require you to code from scratch. In previous exams questions, that was a very common kind of question, so I wouldn't rule that out. The type of questions, Lynn here, sorry if I got your name wrong, I said that. So Lynn, I would say do not rule them out unless you have gotten a specific confirmation from any tutor or the lecturer. Will there be binary on the exam? Might be, but very low chance. Probably not. Yeah, in our ones, not. But again, I don't wanna say no and then it comes. So I don't remember having binary in our year, even in that content, so it should be fine. Posting the useful links. Are the exams usually long? Do people, yes, people do finish with struggling, so don't waste too much time surfing the web or trying to look for answers, and actually answer the questions. When it was offline, it wasn't too long, but it was like just enough to pretty much do it. But I don't know how it's going to be now. It was in the slides. Cool, then that's perfect. Thanks, Lynn. Will there be recursions? Maybe, may not be. Does ethics come from a significant portion of the paper? No, the ethics are like just 1 or 2 questions. Honestly, I winged it because it's like ethics, but I'm not suggesting that for anyone. Would you suggest doing exams prior to 2015 as they're based on Python 2? That's fine. Python 2 and 3, most of the things are same. And even if the exams are on Python 2, you can basically understand most of the things what's going on. So you should be all right. But hey, if you do exam questions up to 2015, Sarah, that's a lot. Let me tell you that. So if you can find them and do them, you're good. If you're worried about recursions, try some recursion questions in LeetCode. Great advice, Phuket. I definitely would recommend. For this subject, I would only recommend easy ones. LeetCode has difficulty. Just do the easy ones. Don't do medium or hard. What kind of questions they ask about ethics theory? Depends. It's just straight from the lectures, and the ethics theory is different from year to year a little bit. So it depends on the lecture slides. The format given to us. I actually noticed the format of the practice is similar to past papers, but whether it will be exactly same to the actual exam is not known to us. I don't think that's often the case. The exact paper might be just a little bit different, but yeah. How many questions do you have here in your exams? Really varies a lot. In the past years, you'll see different exams have different stuff. Cool. So I'll wrap up the questions here. I know you have lots more. You can ask them in the breakout rooms. Thank you so much for asking them. One quick plug, thanks to Andrew. So if you liked my lecture or the talk, and if you are keen to hear more talks, I give them quite frequently in MISC, which is the Melbourne Information Security Club. And we have weekly workshops on cybersecurity, teaching people basics of ethical hacking and all, as well as some awesome guest speaker events. Come join MISC. The link should be in the links Hasne posted. Hasne just posted one now, or you can just go to www.umisc.info. Unfortunately, due to time, I need to wrap up here as well as leave. I will not be one of the participants in the breakout room, but thank you so much for listening and hope this helped. And I'll pass it back to Hasne. Andrew, who do I pass?
Hasne, you want to go for it?
Yep. So now Andrew is going to divide us into breakout rooms where you all will get a tutor assigned to help you solve a practice exam paper so that it helps you get prepared before the exam.
Again, if you have any questions, let me know. More than happy to answer them. Yeah. By the way, can you guys see my screen? Anybody could, if you could just unmute and
yes, we can see
I guess see the left and right. Awesome. Wait, so on the left I have the sample paper and on the right I have the Jupyter notebook. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Awesome, thanks. Cool. So the first question, I think just like Kaif mentioned, I'm not sure how much he did mention, but it's essentially one-liners, and you take this output value like grin, true, and somehow you have to reverse engineer it and find the question or find the expression that gives that output value, right? And they have certain requirements like string slicing and string indexing, right? So really simple, just like an example, a string index takes out the value that you would do index. In this case, it should be O, and a string slice should take a list of these values, like in this case, 1 to the end or W until the end, right? So what we have to do is find the output. The first thing I usually do is type the output and figure out what I can index and what I can slice. This, it kind of looks really simple to say that I'm gonna take the G out of this, and then the same word, I'm gonna take the R to N, right? And it gives me back the same value, right? Where I've indexed and I've sliced. Because as soon as I see this, as soon as I type this down, I see what I could possibly index and what I could slice. Obviously, it seems quite obvious, but that's literally what it is. Again, simple marks, easy, want you to score as much as possible. So yeah, starting from question 1 is always easy this way. Next question, the output value should be true, and you should use the range function and the in function. So the range function should return, okay, in this case, it's going to return a generator. If you don't know what a generator is, that's okay. Okay, that's okay. But this should return a list of those values. And I'm not sure why it is taking long. That's weird. But how many of you know what generators are? Just a quick show of hands once again. And where's my participants list? Oh, that's about 5 people, 6 people. All right, no worries. So awesome. So as you can see here, the range 0 to 2, it didn't exactly give me 0, 1, or 2. In fact, it just gave me back the range name itself, right? The reason that happens is because in Python, to speed things up, it doesn't give you the entire value. Like say if I do a range 10,000, of course, at this very moment, I don't want 1,000 or 10,000. But what I want the for loop to do is that every time I have something like for I in range 5, I, what this for loop does is that it goes down to it goes down to the print statement, finishes that, and comes back up to the for loop, asking the range function for the next value. So in this case, even if you break early, it's a good thing because you're saving a lot of time, memory, and space. And the range function also forgets what the previous value was. So in this case, for I, it goes down, asks the range function, okay, what is I? The first value of I is 0, and then prints 0, and goes back up, forgets the previous value. What's the next value of I? 1, goes down, prints it. And that's how the loop keeps on going, rather than getting this entire list and then going through each and every element of the list, right? It's only to just save time. Again, this knowledge is an extra thing, might not be like completely useful for the exam. But now just solving this, I guess, because of the for loop, it is quite simple. The in statement just takes the element in the range function. So in this case, if I were to copy this, and the reason I put this in a list is because in this case, I actually want the list. And I don't want the generator function, right? So if I would output this list, I get 0 and 1. So 1 in this list, it should return true or false. And that could, again, this one-liner is our answer to question B. Of course, if I'm not making sense, feel free to stop me, ask me to slow down. If I'm going too fast, more than happy to. Yeah, cool. So again, okay, and the reason I'm going slightly fast in the first one is because I just had a quick overview of the questions, and some of them are hard, even if I say so myself, they're hard. And I'd really like to go through them with you guys so you actually understand how to get them in the most efficient and simple manner, if I can do that myself. But yeah, the second question is the output value is 2 required operations are floating division and the integer division. Now, of course, the first thing I do is put my answer there, and then I figure out the first part. How do I, or in this case, I could figure out the second part. How do I convert this in, or how do I do like an integer-based division or floating-based division over here? So 4 divided by 2 is, of course, 2. Let's try that out, right? But it gives me a floating division. So it's neither here nor there because I'm dividing 2 integers and I'm getting a floating point. So the best way to make this a floating division is just do 4.0 divided by 2. So you're dividing a float by an integer, but it is a floating operation. Now the integer-based division, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but say I do a double slash. So basically okay, how do I put this? It divides a number such that it gives you only the integer value and not the decimal points. So it ignores every single number after the decimal point and gives you that particular whole number before the decimal point, right? And this is the integer-based division. So I take the floating-based division, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this by 2 because I'm going to take the integer-based division and divide it by 2. Cool, yeah, good. So this is a floating number. Again, even if I'm using the division-based thing, I need to have an integer in the start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just turn this into an int. And there you go. As simple as that. Now, I know like most of you guys, since this is your grok output, I don't know how much you could just simply keep checking your answers and keep marking it over and over again. And I know grok is quite slow because I used it myself. So what I use, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say the way that the exam works is that the actual text file that you're writing into doesn't have a testing capability, but there's nothing from stopping you from using your own IDE and just checking your own answers.
Awesome, brilliant. So do you guys, all right, quick show of hands if you guys need a quick run through on Jupyter Hub, or like if you haven't used an IDE before, don't know what an IDE is. Just a quick show of hands, I'll take you through it because it's super, super important if you guys don't know. Right, so 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Damn, COMP10001 really missed out on the important stuff. All right, awesome. I'll take you through this. Just should be like 10 minutes at max. So an IDE is where essentially a place where you execute code, as simple as that. And for Python, what you could do is have, just like how I'm doing it online, you just go to collab.research.google.com. The first thing you are popped up with this, you click on the new notebook, and then voila, it's pretty much done. You have your IDE set up and ready. Now in this particular IDE, what you do is it's something called a Jupyter notebook, where you can execute one single cell at a time rather than the entire script of 300 or 400 lines, right? So just like what I was doing over here, I was showing you one cell at a time and I'm showing you the output. And it's really simple if you want it to be fast, efficient, and you want to try things again and again, like multiple times. And it even stores variables between different cells, right? So if in one cell I have print a is equal to 5, like I've initiated it, and the other cell I'm printing it, it works because it stores all the memory from before. So you don't have to keep running code, saving your variables again and again. Really simple, really easy, fast to use. So just like how I'm doing it here, I'd suggest splitting the windows. Your grok on your left, your IDE on your right. and keep furiously typing throughout the rest of the exam, because while I know 2 hours is quite some time, it might not be sufficient, because the exams, at least since it's been online, it is slightly different. I probably would say slightly harder than what it was, when I was writing it in person. Hopefully that made sense. If not, I'm more than happy to repeat. So a quick show of hands if you did understand it, or rather, okay, a quick show of hands if you did not understand it. Even if there's like,
bear in mind that your hand stays raised until you put it down. So it may still be up if you didn't intend it to be.
Thank you so much for that. So yeah, 2 hands, 1 hand. I'm not sure if you guys know your hand is up. Okay, that's down to 1 hand. Cool. Looks like all, or at least most of you know it. Awesome. So that should be the most simplest and easiest way to do things. And just like I'm doing it, hopefully this gives you the confidence to work on it during the exam as well. And feel free to practice or play around right before your exam. It would be really helpful during the exam. Awesome. So that's question C. That's done. Now question D. So my output value, it should be a 0, and I should use the dictionary lookup method, the dictionary pop, and the list indexing. So the dictionary lookup, if I remember correctly, you have a dictionary and you call a key to get that value, correct? And then the pop method pops the first element out of the dictionary, and the list indexing is just indexing just like a string, right? So going through this, I'm going to put my answer over here, which is 0. And now I'm going to have to build a dictionary around this. And a really simple one-liner dictionary is just, I call the number here. So some random 1 is 0, some random 2 is 3, right? Just keeping it plain and simple.
I think you've got an extra bracket there, unless you're.
Oops. Yeah, I'm not putting a dictionary in dictionary, thanks. So a dictionary lookup, now that I have my dictionary in place, the lookup is I'm going to call the key. And because I'm asking for 0, I'm going to call the key of 1. Sorry. Oh yeah, that is there. I'm going to put 1 into my key because it goes through the various keys, and the only keys here are 1 and 2. I'm saying keys again and again, but my final output should be 0, right? So that should give me a 0, and it did. So I'm going to go back to the cell because that first part is verified. Now the second part. Oh wait.
Well, you could put a list as the value for one of them and just use that index from.
Awesome. So now the dot pop method, it works either in the dictionaries or in lists. What I could do in this case is wrap this around a list. And when I do dot pop, okay, awesome, cool. So wait a second.
You would just need to pop 0, the index from 0, because it automatically takes the final object if you don't.
So doesn't the pop, return the value that it has removed?
Yes, it does, but you need to specify. Otherwise it just removes the last object.
Awesome, cool. There you go. So I've popped the 0th element, and that's, of course, just use the dot pop and pop the 0th element because it's the 0th element in this list. And now I'm going to have to do list indexing. So what I could do in this case is add another list inside this, right? So when I do that, it gives me a list of 0 and 1, and then I take out the 0th index of this, and there you go. So what we've essentially done is converted something like this to this. It seems confusing at start, but then when you start going from the answer and passing through all these, how do I put this, all these requirements, it should become easier and easier as you go about, rather than jumping all in at once, right? And finally, the output value is ace. You need to use the dot items method, which the first thing that should pop into your mind is a dictionary, list indexing, and tuple indexing. All right. So we'll start with building a dictionary. And of course, we need the ace in the dictionary items. So a key of 1, then I put this in ace. Key of 2, and put some random type. Right. And since it's a dictionary, I can just call dot items directly, and it should give me a dict.items, a list of tuples, right? So because it's giving me a list of tuples, oh wait, it's a list and then inside you have a bunch of tuples. All right, so that kind of answers all three parts of it. So the first thing we need to do is just take the first element of that list, which should give me, that is interesting. Why is it not so
because
simple?
you can't index from items.
Perfect. So what do we do?
Someone else want to answer?
Make a list.
Yeah. You want to make a list? All right, let's try that. We will make a list around this. Awesome. Yeah, see, easy. So we made a list around this, and then we call the first element of that. That should return a tuple. And then in the tuple, we want the ace. And there you go. We've done tuple indexing, list indexing, and thanks to you guys, you've solved it in half the time I could have. Awesome. So that is the first part. And I'm not sure how we're going on time, but I'd say if this were an exam setting and you wouldn't be talking so much, you would still be going really well, right? So the second question, and this is a question where I always mess up personally because it does seem very daunting and hard to start off with. So I'm just going to read through the question, and hopefully you guys also understand as I'm going through it. The following function is intended to calculate the similarity between two names by calculating what proportion of n-grams from the first name can be found in the second name. Now, this first sentence is confusing as it is, so I slow down, and then I see that you're calculating similarity between two names, and you're calculating what proportion of n-grams. And an n-gram is a substring of n characters, right? So in this case, if I have Toto and Totoro, Toto is a substring of Totoro, right? And it's a substring of 4 characters, right? And you are, in this case, you are looking for, what can I say? An arbitrary number of sub-characters that are matching the main function, right? So, and in this case, they specify the first name can be found only in the second name, and you're not looking vice versa, right? So once you do that, you average across the resulting values because you could have multiple values, and then for each value of n from 2 up to max n, if the first name has fewer characters. Okay, so the reason they're doing 2 up to max n is because they're not looking for just a single character in the entire second name, but they're looking for at least 2 or a minimum of 2 substrings in the entire name, right? So from 2 up to max n, and max n is something that we have created, and I think from my first look, it should be the maximum size of the substring. So from 2 up to max n, if the first name has fewer characters, oh wait, I'm mixing sentences. Averaging across resulting. All right, yeah, so they just average from 2 up to max n, and even if you find multiple answers, you just average your score. And if the first name has fewer characters than any of the tested values, it should return 0. So if you want, of course, if you have fewer characters than what is required, return 0 because that is not valid. Yeah, so, all right, that is just a little to help us. Finally, so we have this thing over here. Please tell me you guys can see it. If not, I can zoom in a little. Actually, I'll just zoom in. Never mind.
That's right
Cool.
for me, thanks.
Awesome. So we have a list of expressions, and clearly they're not in order and they're not indented correctly. And so we're going to have to fix this in our own way. And again, the best way to do it is through an external IDE, because like I think Maria said, the Grok website won't let you keep running this to check what's going right and what's not, right? So the first thing I look for, obviously, well, not so obvious, but the first thing I would really look for is the function header, because to start off a function, you need a function header and you need the arguments, right? So I have the function header on the first bit, and name1 into max n. If you guys are going to use an IDE, just remember you have to copy it word to word. You have to copy it letter to letter, because of course, if you do mess up and your code messes up, you can't figure out where it's going wrong, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be really time consuming to just debug your code. In those cases, I just say start off new, because it's much more easier to copy it. And since you've done it before, you have an idea of how the logic is progressing. Right.
Just as a quick note, if anyone's actually tried this, I don't know if there's actually a better way of doing it than how they do, because And when you do this in Grok, you have to click and drag all the individual statements across and then indent them just by dragging them into the correct locations. It's actually really, really annoying to do this. You can't just copy and paste a finished result. So if anyone knows how to make that less annoying, I'd be very appreciative if anyone's done this before in their practice.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Yes, definitely annoying. But I guess the way I'm just teaching right now, or the way I'm going through this right now, is that just make sure you get the logic correctly, and then I think just copy and paste it down, like indent it correctly. Make sure you just do that right in the most simplest terms. I don't think I can provide any more advice on that. But anyway, coming back to the question. So you have the function header. So the first thing's gone. And looking at the rest of them, so you have an empty, I'm just going through talking out aloud. You have an empty list, you have a return function, so you have a return statement, and your return statement is always going to be in the bottom. Your initialization statements should always be on the top, because your function needs to know what variables it's working on. Again, another return statement on the bottom. And the fact that we have two return statements shows that there is like one false output and one where the output is valid or true, right? So you have these two cases. You have an if statement. Not sure what it's doing right now, but of course the length of the first name is trying to check the length. And again, this would possibly be a special case. And then if ngram in name2, you're checking for that particular letter in name2. Simlist.append. So it looks like, and by the way, I'm just gonna put this here because I got it recently. It is simlist.append matches divided by length of n1 minus n minus 1. Right, because the screenshot is cut off. But anyway, this is the code, and it looks like we actually found a match, and we're appending it to a sim list, or sim list is short for similarity list. And then we have another for loop. I have no idea what it's doing. We have matches, so it's looking for the number of matches clearly. For n in range 2 to max n plus 1, it's just as we discussed. It's going from the second character onwards. You're not looking for single characters. If sim list, so if the similarity list is true because it was empty, but if something had actually filled it, then possibly you would use the matches plus equal to 1 because you found a match. Or, we'll go through it. I'm still not sure what it's doing. Of course, you need to initialize the matches, and then ngram itself. You're looking for that particular substrate of that code. All right, so it is a lot, but first thing I would see is initialization. And that is only because if I see here that the return statement only works if it knows what simlist is. This if statement works only if it knows what n is. Name1 and name2 are given in the arguments, but in this case, it doesn't know what ngram is, doesn't know what matches, doesn't know what n, blah, blah, blah. So first things first, look for those initialization keywords. Sorry. And the first thing I can see is simlist, because you do need a similarity list. Your code will be working based on that similarity list. So I'll start off with opening that up. And then, of course, you, what will we do next? So, of course, the logic, the whole idea of the code, is to go through the entire, like from word to word, from name1 to name2, and figure out, whether it's matching. So I would say this for loop for n in range 2 to max n plus 1, as they've given in the description, is the first or the right for loop to go about. So I start off by putting that in for n in range 2 to max n plus 1. And again, a really helpful point about an IDE is that it automatically indents for you. So I think since I've used Grok before, I remember you had to put either the 4 tabs or 4 spaces or just keep going and whatnot. But luckily that sorted out for you, and hopefully, that makes your life easier. So now that I'm going through all the characters, of course, so I can strike this out. Sorry, which one? Oh yeah, this out. And that means, again, there is one more initialization key that we need to use, which is matches, because we're trying to find the number of matches, right? So again, I put that on the top. And of course, now is the logic on its own. the first thing I would see is relevant to us is that if length of name 1 is greater than or equal to n. And now we finally know what n is because n goes from 2 to max n plus 1. Do you guys think there's any other expressions that could be relevant in this case, if not if length of name plus 1 greater than or equal to n? And by the way, if I'm rambling too fast or if I'm going, if you don't understand, please feel free to stop me. I think I'm going too fast, but I'm not sure if you guys don't tell me.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I was distracted from something else. What was the question?
Yeah, so I was going to go with this phrase, if length of name 1 greater than or equal to n, because we're trying to find if that name is actually valid. But would there be anything else that you guys think of in these list of expressions that we could use? Also, if you guys can give me 1 second, I will bring the charger to my laptop because
yes, 18%.
Right, sorry. Thank you guys for weirdly waiting because of my untidiness. But anyway, coming back. Okay, so I don't think there's any other keywords that I could possibly use because the first thing I need to do is check for what's it called? Check if this match is actually valid, right? So in this case, it would be if length of name 1 greater than or equal to n, right? So the reason I'm doing that is because every time we're going through name 1, or the first time we go through name 1, we want to see if, of course, it is a valid substring for name 2. So if it is, then the next thing I would do is going through name 1, which is which loop goes through name 1? Yes. So start in range 0 length of name 1 minus n minus 1. Now at first look, I don't know what minus n minus 1 is really doing. And I guess in this case, if I were doing this, I'd say it doesn't matter to me because I'm not focused on what the end result is. I'm not focused if it's overflowing. I just need to copy it because I know the logic is to go through each and every letter from name 1 and see if it is a match in name 2, right? So because of that, my next line going through everything would be to see if I have a match, which, right, I'd probably use this. So n-gram is equal to name 1, and of course I'm slicing it from the start to the end. And yeah, so the n-gram actually gives me like the number of characters or the number of substrings that I want to, what is it called? What's the word? When you compare, yeah, I want to compare between name 1 and name 2 and see if it's right? So I do that. I get like my n-gram token, which is like a small token. And once I do that, oh wait, of course, I'm like inherently I was typing an if statement because I'm checking if it is valid. But which if statement would that be? Of course, if n-gram in name 2. Right. So now that I found my substring, I want to find if it's a valid substring in my name 2. Right. So far going through the code, we've initiated a couple of variables. We're going through our name from our name 1 from 0 to 1. Of course, we have an if statement to check if that name is valid. We're finding that substring in that particular name 1, and we're checking if that is in name 2. So we've done the hefty part of the code, the entire logic on its own. So of course, if n-gram is in name 2, I would add this to my matches keyword because it's a match, right? And if it is a match, if it's going through all of this, what I would do is I would append this to my sim list. All right, so length, oh, there it is. I could just copy this. I append this to my sim list, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it, right? No, wait. So what is simlist appending? So simlist is appending matches divided by length of name on minus n minus 1. So what is really going on here? Oh no, it seems right. If it's wrong, we'll figure it out. We always can read on this code and whatnot. So yeah, I'm appending this to my sim list if it seems like a match. And then, of course, I need to exit from this for loop because I want to return the statements, right? And the reason I'm exiting is because they could be possible, like multiple matches, and I don't want to exit from my first match on its own, right? So I would go out to this first for loop if sim list exists. So if that is a valid list, I would return, which return list would that be? Some list divided by length of sim list. So of course, if sim list exists, return that. Otherwise, I would return 0 or 0.0. Cool. So we have this function in place. It seems all right. And now we also have test cases that we could test, literally. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this function, I'm going to put it here. I'm going to start with the first test case.
You misspelled
Yeah.
matches.
Oh, yeah, my bad. Thanks so much for that. And remove this. Cool. Now, what is our issue?
Wait, I think you spelled matches wrong in the actual code. Like
Awesome.
if you go up, it's, yeah, right there.
Thank you so much for that. Now, what is our act? Now, what is another issue? Why am I getting like -0.95 out of everything? Did you guys figure it out?
I think when you append the number to sim list, I think you should have a bracket around length of name minus n minus 1.
Awesome. Yes, that is correct. And I didn't realize it while I was typing it. So thank you so much for pointing that out. Cool. So what is the other issue that we're facing now in my really poorly written code? Why is it a 0.7? So in cases like this, the first thing I really do is print where it could possibly go wrong. In this case, of course, I'm guessing it is something to do with the sim list because essentially we're trying to append the score into this. But should it be appended multiple times or should it be appended once? Let's see how many times it is getting appended. Wow, okay, so it's going through the list 5 times, and why not just print the list altogether? So we have 5 matches for total and total. 1's a 30% match, 6 is a 6% match, 100% yes. Oh, I see where it's going wrong. Do you guys see where it's going wrong? Feel free to shout out. It's always fun when I see silly things like this that I did. Let me know if you guys found out the error. Anyone at all? I'll be looking at the chat as well if you guys have found anything. Any takers at all? No worries, it's fine. So what's going wrong is that taking this name, Totoro, right? It's going through, of course, it's a 3n-gram, so it goes through the first letter on up until the third letter, right? So it takes t, it matches this, and then t divided by, you know, the length of the n-grams, that is 1 by 3. So yes, it's saying that, you know, once it's gone to the 3, it's a 33% match. Once it's gone to the O, it's a 66% match. And once it finishes, once it finishes the third t, or the second t, the third letter, it's a 100% match, right? And then the same case, the OTO, because it's taking 3 letters at once. It takes the O, compares it to this one. It's a, why is it a 50% match? Oh, I think it's because it's compared it before. I'm not sure. All right, but I'm not sure what's happening in the second part, but that's essentially the logic. It goes to 33, 66, 1, and then 50%, 100%. So essentially, it's coming to the 100% in the end, but we don't need it to cover every single base every time, right? So what's gone wrong is that I've indented my sim list incorrectly. Instead, it should probably come out here, because every time it's going through and finding a match, I want it to just append the final output of that, right? So if I put some list there, let's see what happens. 1, 1, and I get my 1 as an output. Does that make sense? If not, I'm more than happy to explain again. Except I didn't explain it well to myself even that time. Let me know if you guys understood this. Anybody? Oh yeah. I guess a better way is those who did not understand, please raise your hand. If there's like more than 3 people, I will be more than happy to explain once more. Awesome, cool. So there are 3 people. More than happy to explain. So to those who raise their hand, do you want me to explain just the sim list part or the entire code? Happy to do both. Just like a heads up.
I'm just confused about the last part.
The sim list, why I pulled it in?
Yeah, I'm confused about the indentation.
Yeah, the indentation. Where do you
Okay,
want
sure. So let me put this back here. Let me put this in. And then what's happening here? The match is about the 10%. Right, of course. Cool. So the best way to understand this would actually be to go through the code with 2 examples. Again, this Toto and Totoro. So starting with the function definition, it's being called. There's a sim list initiated, and then it's going from n until like the second character up until the third character. The reason we're doing 3 + 1 over here is because the range function does not execute the last number of the range. I'm pretty sure you guys should know this. So in the range function, it just goes to the second and third character. And once that happens, we have a matches, which is 0, because we're trying to find the number of matches. And then we're verifying that name1 is actually greater than n, because of course, we're trying to find the second and third character in a 3-letter word. And we don't want the word to be smaller than the second and third character. And once that's happened, the logic of the code, which is pretty much this. Now in this logic, I'm going from the first, so range, of course, length goes from 0, and the max is, in this case, it will be length 4 minus 2 minus 1, which is -1. And the start is just going from range 0 to 3, and it goes 0, 1, 2, and the 0, 1, 2 is just to represent the TOT in total, right? Because we're going through 3 letters at once. And once that's done, we have an n-gram, which I will also print out, because it is quite confusing just even to myself. And when I do that, oh, yeah, let me remove this. Cool. Yeah, that makes so much more sense. So we see the n-gram is essentially, it takes 2 characters at a time, right? And then, after that, we're taking 3 characters at a time. So taking the 2 characters at a time, we have the TO, OT, and TO from Toto, right? And we're trying to see if that is a match, essentially, in this entire word, Totoro, right? So if n-gram and name 2 match, we add one more match, and then the length of that, length of name 1, which is 4, 4 minus n, which is 2, 2 minus 1, 1, 4 minus 1, 3. Okay, that makes sense. Andrew, do you want to take over for a second?
Yeah. Sorry, I was doing something else. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm just trying to explain name similarity. I kind of know what's happening, but I don't know how to explain it.
All right. Yeah, this is so it's with the indentation of the where you append to sim list, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a little bit complicated. But basically you kind of have to understand how the what they want you to do or how the algorithm works. So it's supposed to in the description for the function, you're going through. So like for each n, you're going through the n-grams and counting up how many n-grams are in. So how many n-grams from total are in Totoro. So and then you basically average out the proportions of those of n-grams that are from the first string that's in the second string. So in that for loop, basically you're counting up the n-grams that are part of the second string, and then you want to calculate the proportion of those that are in the second string with the total number of n-grams that you tried. So that's why you loop through and find the matches is the number of n-grams that are in the second string. So you find the number of matches in that for loop, and after the for loop, you add that proportion number into sim list. Is that?
Well, that made sense to me, but
yeah.
to you guys, did it make sense? Should be under the first for loop. That is correct.
Sorry, I think so. Linda says she thinks a sim list equals the initialization.
No, that's correct. Yeah. I was just explaining why we got it from inside to outside. And that was because of exactly that. The reason I put it inside in the first place is because if n-grams was in name 2, I thought the sim list should append that into the list of, I guess, like the percentage similarity. But then I realized that it's taking every small percentage that is not important. Instead, I just need the final match.
Yeah.
Right, and that's why I brought it outside, because I didn't want it to go through the for loop multiple times. So once I brought it out, I just again run this name similarity, and I get the one.
Yeah.
Hopefully that makes sense to everybody over here. Feel free to put in the chat if a yes or a no. Really helps us move forward. Awesome. So, Andrew, how are we doing? How are we doing in time? Do we have enough time to go through more?
So we are a bit over time. I think it's supposed to end at 6. And yeah, I am conscious I don't want to take up too much of your time for this. So yeah, like it's good that we finished this, which is like a really hard example. Yeah, we can end it here, or yeah, if you have extra time, you could keep going.
Yeah, sure. At least if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I'm happy to stay on for like at least 10 more minutes and solve this, like solve any questions people have. And I'm sure, people have other things to do, so no problem. Feel free to leave if you have to.
I'm not too familiar with CSV files.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the next few questions, and I really struggled with those. Just trying to understand the questions.
Sure. Yeah. So have you gone through the questions, like question 3 and 5, I think, because 5 also has CSVs. Are you comfortable with one of them, or none of them make sense?
None of them.
It's fine. It's completely fine.
Yeah, I couldn't really do CSV files.
Okay, sure. Yeah, no worries. I'm happy to go through it. Let me just see if there's any more CSV questions. Errors 1, 2, 3. Okay, so there's not. Question 5. CSV. Yes, and question 6 is just making a function. Cool.
Could we do question 5? Wait, was that the one for writing?
Question 5, like the fill in, I think that's fill in the blanks, right? Yeah, do you want me to go through question 5?
Yes, please.
Sure, no problem, no worries. So just gonna go through reading out aloud. If it doesn't make sense, stop me. So we have a function CSV aggregate, which takes 2 arguments, an in file and an out file. An in file is a string, and an out file is also a string, and that's basically the name of the file names that go in and out, right? And then in your in file, we have 3 categories: doc ID, sent ID, and pause or position, assuming it's position. So the way a CSV file works is that every single element is separated by a comma, like this one over here, right? And every single entry is separated by a new line, right? So your first line over here, or usually what happens in a CS file is your first line is your headers, like doc ID, sent ID, position, and that's a pause. And that's because it's trying to identify what this row is going to be, what the next row is going to be, and of course, because you need that information to build a table, right? CSV files are honestly one of the most commonly most common files used, because it's really easy to encode and decode, only because every single value is separated by a comma, right? You could put strings into it and then put a comma outside to separate it. You could put keywords, you could put a lot of things, and read it, send it to other people, yada yada, right? So now going through the file, in file is blah blah blah, where each non-header row contains the ID of a document, which is doc ID, the ID of a sentence, the ID of a sentence, and a binary value indicating whether the given sentence has a positive sentiment. So it's just either 0 or 1. I'm guessing it's true or false, for maybe positive or not positive. So the function takes in file, calculates the relative proportion of positive sentiment sentences, and returns a single row for the document containing the doc ID, the calculated proportion, and saves it to the out file, right? So for example, the given sentence, for example, the given file in sentences.csv, where is sentences.csv? Or it's probably the one on top. So yeah, for the given file in sentences.csv with the content above, the out file will be as follows. So what it's doing is it's going through each and every document. It's going through the sentence ID of that document, which is 0 and 1, and it's calculating the positive sentiments ratio. So in this case, it will go through the first 2 rows because both of them have 0 as a document. 0 plus, so one has a positive sentiment of 0, another has a positive sentiment of 1, and that average, of course, is 0.5, right? So it would just average it out and return 0.5. In the second case, the document ID is 1 through, so it's going through one document, 3 different sentences, 0, 1, 2, each of them have a negative sentiment, if I can call it that, or a non-positive sentiment, 0, 0, 0, the average should be 0 in the output. So that's essentially what the code wants us to do, or we're running through the logic. And now it's going to be a fill in the blanks. So please provide the code into each number of boxes and describe. Okay, that's fine. And is there anything here? Okay. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep typing along because it really helps me understand what I'm doing and where I'm going wrong, right? And as I'm typing along, first and foremost is the function header. All right, so for questions like this, it's the way I go through it, or it's really important. The way it's really important is that as I type, even like the blanks as well, I try to keep a mental note of what variables have been called and what not. So in this case, the first thing I can notice is that there's a FP outright, right? So that means there's like we're opening a file to a write, but we don't have a file where we're reading anything at all. But that should be our in file, right? So I would say, the first thing we need to do is really read the file. And that's where, what will we use over here? Is it fpout.read? Oh no, wait, my bad. So this fpout is writing into the out file, but we do need to read the file. So I will call a file pointer. What should it be? fpin is equal to open. Oh wait, my bad. So I fpout.write, but we don't even know what fpout is. So the first thing we're going to do, like in initiating, is call or like create an fpout instance. So you do fpout.open. My bad. Yeah. What would it be? So fpout.write is writing just the headers. So fpout.in would just call the out file, of course, and then it would just call it in write mode. Sorry, it's been a while since I used file, but hopefully that is the right answer. I think it should be the right answer. If not, we can just keep running through the code again and again. Cool. So fpout, and then you open a file, and then of course you do fpout.write.
Does FP stand for anything?
Yeah, so FP is just file pointer.
Yeah.
So that's just shorthand. I mean, people often use it even in the industry. But really, in this case, it shouldn't matter. Like, don't even think about what the variable names really mean. Just think of it as a random variable, random name. All you need to know is what the variable is actually doing. In this case, since you know fpout is writing, it's a file pointer. No, it's something to do with file pointers, right? That's pretty much it. So copying that, and I have the doc ID positivity ratio, which is that's what pos means and not position. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then previous doc ID. I'm not sure why there's a previous doc ID, but okay. So the second line, I'm not sure what it is, so I'm going to leave it blank. If anyone, you can do that. The third line, we'll throw in csv.dictreader. Of course, it's going to be opening the in file. And over here, we have the third one, which I'm not sure what it's doing again, but that's okay. And third one, okay, so I guess, one thing that I see is quite obvious to me is that, in the third line, there should be an if statement. I'm not sure what if statement it should be, but because it's a if statement, it's going through basically every code under that is being indented, or sorry, any if statement or a for loop or a while loop, my bad. So any of those keywords, and the code is being indented below. So I just need to keep that in mind when I'm writing my code. Right. Once that happens, if this doc ID is not equal to none, dot right.
Could I just ask, how would you like figure out if it's a for loop or if statement?
Right. So that really depends on the logic of the code, right? We'll be going through the logic in a second. So I'm just like taking this as if I was taking the exam, and honestly, if I were, there's so many things that I don't know about. There's so many things I don't know about. So what I do is I skip, I go down up until the end, and then I see all the variable names, and then I realize, oh shit, okay, maybe this goes up there and this goes up there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you guys do the same, but I think it's just a helpful approach for those who are always oblivious like me and who don't know what things are happening and how. But anyway, oops, yeah. So fbr.write. So it's an f string with doc ID, and I need the false total. So finally, something that is making sense to me. So in this case, we are going through each and every doc ID, and we're finding the, what's it called, the positivity, and we're dividing it by the total available positivity, the total number of positive fields. So this would mean that I need to initiate positivity or total sometime before, because it really isn't making sense if I were to just call it randomly. Right? Previous doc ID was, but not pos and total. So going through this, I'm guessing line number 2 might be the best place to put it, only because you need it before you even enter the form. So pos equals. Right. So here, of course, you need it only in one line. So what I would do is just put it into like pos equals total equals 0, because that's the only way you could put in one line. I understand like things like these are sort of tricky, and even in the exam, I have two variables. I have 2 times I need to initiate it, but then there's only one line. It kind of confuses me if I'm going wrong somewhere. But sometimes they often just ask you to use trick things like these, like try initiating 2 variables at once. Yeah, cool. So of course, pos total 0 should go there, because this should be an if or while loop or statement, and of course we are trying to initiate something. So once we have that, once we have pos and total equals 0, the third one, I'm still not sure what it is, so I'm going to leave it as it is. And what I'm going to do here is, so the fourth one goes out of the loop, and then it reinitiates pos total 0. What fourth one possibly be? I'm not sure. And finally, so pos 1. Total possibly 1. Yeah. So number 5, and what is happening here, I don't know. I will have to look at the end afterwards. Okay, so far, the only thing we've done is initiation, and probably like the initiation of the file as well. So we'll have to go through the logic of the code. The base logic, of course, is given by this fpr.write, and we only know what pos is and total is. So for row in csv.dictReader, I'm not so. It would, as far as I remember, the dictReader, what it should do is that it will, for every row in, So for every row in this, it combines it with a key. It combines it with a key pair value. The key being doc ID, and the value being 0 in this case, sent ID 0 and positivity 0, right? So in this case, for row in the open file, what could it be possibly doing? Oh, right, yes. One thing that we haven't done before, one thing that we should do is that while it goes through every single doc ID, it's not calculating whether, so in this case, you have 2 documents of 0. It needs to combine those 2 documents and give the final output, right? But it doesn't know that this document, like it should keep, it should ignore like the document unless it moves on to the next document. It should keep collecting information about the previous one. And that's why we have an if statement over there. Damn, I really love these moments. Okay, so if that happens, I would, if row doc ID, right? Yes, doc ID is not equal to previous doc ID, and that's why we have a previous doc ID. So does that make sense? So what we're trying to do here is that we're trying to make sure it's not, so this code would work only if it's like a new doc ID. In this new doc ID, it would take the previous doc ID and calculate its values, because unless, so for every document ID it goes through, it keeps collecting the values, and every time it hits a new document, it stores the previous values, because then it's realized that the old document is done. Yeah, so, and that's why we're having this if statement over here, because we want to check whether the doc ID is being changed again and again or not, right? So that's why we have that if statement. And then now going through the next piece of code, if it's the previous doc ID and doc ID is not none, I'm writing the document ID and then the value, or the position ratio, as they like to call it. Now in statement 4, what is happening? Yes, of course. Now that we have a previous doc ID, and if it's written that, we need to update the doc ID. So the previous doc ID would be equal to row of doc ID. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. And finally, it's going through everything. If the position is 1, if the positivity is 1, of course append that to the positivity. The total always keeps appending, even if it's outside the if statement. And then if previous doc ID is none, of course this being if the previous doc ID is not equal to none, essentially this for loop, it's going to go through every single one of the rows. But then when you come to the last row, you don't have another doc ID for this to execute. So then you come back to the end, and of course, if it's not none, this is just a safety check. You write it finally. And I could possibly copy this and paste it here. And hopefully that should work. Does that make sense? I know I probably went on blabbering, but hopefully that makes sense. If not, let me know in the chat, or please raise your hand. More than happy to help.
Why were they defining those variables at the beginning of like post equals to total equals to 0?
Oh, why are we doing that? Okay. Just confirming that is your question, right? Okay, you have another one.
And then they divided it like post divides total, like later lines. So I just, yeah, like why do they define those variables?
Yeah, sure. So going through the, so going through the question here, the pause divided by total, it was given in the question. And usually what I do is just copy it, but then the logic is actually, it's given in the question itself. And in the question, what they're trying to do is calculate something called the positivity ratio. So the idea for the question is to go through each and every document, calculate, so this last bit is full of zeros and ones, right? And this is your positivity. So it's going through every document and calculating the average positivity that is available in that, right? And this is just your average positivity. So it's just the total number of instances. Like in this document, there is like 1, 2. So there's 2 instances for document number 0. And out of which the 2 instances, there's 1 instance of it being positive, right? So you just do a 1 divided by 2 and you get 0.5, if that makes sense. And that's why you put it here. In the second document, which is document number 1, you have 3 records. And in all the 3 records, your positivity is 0. So the average of all positivity in that case is 0 because it's 0 divided by 3. In case if it was a 1 here and a 1 here, that means there's 2 positive records out of 3. So the average is 2 divided by 3. And that's only the logic over here. What they're doing is try to implement the logic.
Where did they
Yeah.
increment total? Because they
Sorry?
like, did they like increment the value of total in the code? Because I
Yes.
couldn't.
So that happens here. So this code is slightly confusing because they're implementing it after all the logic happens. But essentially what it's doing, or what the logic is trying to say, is that unless it reaches a new document ID, keep incrementing the total, keep incrementing the cost. Right? So in this case, it will go through document number 0. None of this if statement would not be valid, and so it will not go through this code. Instead, it will come down here and increment pause and total. This will happen for the first record, for the second record, and in the third record, the document ID is number 1, which is a new document ID. So what happens is that it comes into this code, it writes it down into the file, and then reinitiates pause and total because it's a new document, and then starts incrementing again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Right?
Awesome.
And the reason we're just doing a pause and total over here is because before this piece of code, it doesn't even know what pause and total are. So it would come down to this if statement because it's a new document, pause plus equal to 1, but it doesn't know what pause is. So that's why we're doing a pause equals total equals 0 here. Yeah.
Yeah, and for the first one, is if that isn't Brave doc ID. Did we write a line for? Oh yeah, we did. Okay. Yeah. All good.
Oh, good. Awesome. Cool. I think that's pretty much it. Again, I'm happy to wait for 5 more minutes. Anybody have any more questions? What I'm guessing, Andrew, is this possible? So to all the attendees today, could we send them the answers to all the samples so they have a reference and they know where they're going right or wrong in case they attempt it?
Yeah, we'll try to make it happen.
Awesome. Cool. If there's nothing else, again, if anything, I have the chat open right now. Any problems, any doubts, let me know. Otherwise, feel free to leave. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you.